On tonight's episode of MAFS, we found out that love does not exist. If you love my reviews, hit that follow button and let's do this every night together. Also, I'm trying to get through this without crying, but if I do, it might be funny for you and less funny for me. Veronica woke up in Dave's bed looking very snuggly. She was like, "How'd you sleep, Dave?" She said that the two were really getting on. But did they get it on? We don't know. But we do know that men can't be trusted. Jackie woke up overjoyed with the time that she'd spent with Jeff. He'd cooked, he'd cleaned, he'd made meals, he'd paid for meals, making Ryan look even more mediocre than he already is. Jamie and Adrian received the honesty letter task. Jamie detailed her confusion as to why Dave never initiates sex. Adrian was like, "Oh, maybe he's just not attracted to you, Jamie. Have you ever considered if he was like with a 10 out of 10 model or actress or someone attractive, that maybe he would be having more sex than he is now?" Jamie was like, no, hadn't considered that one, Adrian. Veronica went out for breakfast with Dave, and Dave was like, "How's your breakfast, Veronica?" And she was like, "Oh my God, you're so funny, Dave. Like, maybe I'm just not chill enough for Elliot." And it seemed like Dave was low-key uncomfortable with her advances, but also low-key loving it, because as we know, love does not exist. Jamie and Adrian received their next task, where Jamie had to ask Adrian some hard-hitting questions. She was like, "Do you think Dave likes me?" Adrian goes, "Oh, no." Jamie was like, "Do you think he'll ever say that he loves me back?" Adrian goes, "Oh, no, because that actually could be quite embarrassing to say to the whole world, Jamie. You know, he's on national television and that could be pretty embarrassing." It was so brutal. Tact, not this man's forte. Beth finally got to escape Ryan's apartment and she basically bolted out the door, whereas Veronica was taking her sweet, sweet time to leave Dave. She was like, "Oh, let me just do one more sweep of the apartment. Oh, is that my bottle cap? I can't forget that." Karina finally gets home to Punchy Paul and she's all like, "Oh my God, I missed you punching balls so much, Paul. It's so nice to be home to our battered house." Everything was going great until they received their next task. Paul had to read Karina the letter he'd written to Athena. All of a sudden, Paul gets these flashbacks of all of the awful things he wrote about Karina, calling her a snob, calling her judgy. It was just awful, awful, awful. And he, all of a sudden, gets very sheepish. So Paul starts reading and he's like, "Well, Karina, sometimes she wants to put on a mask. Like, she pretends to be something that she's not sometimes because she says that she does not like tattoos and she wants to be conservative and perfect when she herself has tattoos." It goes on, but he starts stuttering his words. He's like, "Yeah, and, where was I? Oh, and there was that little time that I told you I got with Cleo and you said that you couldn't believe that I got with someone of that caliber. And then, you know, sometimes I feel like you can be quite judgy." But Paul left out a few crucial parts of the letter. Notably, when he called Karina snobby. Karina was visibly upset, and justifiably so. And Paul was like, "Oh, honey, are you putting on your happy mask?" Don't even try, Paul. I've had enough of you tonight. The producers then pulled Paul into a Voxy, and they were like, "Hey, Paul, did you miss any parts of the letter that you wrote?" And he was like, "Oh, what, miss anything? Did I? No, me. Meanwhile, Karina starts reading the letter herself and realizes that he did, in fact, miss some crucial details. Jeff and Ree were overjoyed to be reunited. They started talking about future plans and saying that they really wanted this relationship to work on the outside of the experiment. But Jackie's reunion with Ryan wasn't quite as smooth. She read her letter to the apprentice warrior, which basically listed all of his character faults, in particular, his fragile ego and desire to have a trad wife. Afterwards, she doubled down on her concerns. She basically said she was worried that Ryan wouldn't make enough money to be the breadwinner and asked him if he would be okay with being a stay-at-home dad. The apprentice warrior was fuming. He was like, "Jackie, that is so insulting that you would even suggest that I might be a stay-at-home dad. I want to leave a legacy. Jackie was like, that's all well and good, but what if your wife gets sick? Are you going to look after the kids then? Ryan was like, how dare you? Now, the fact that some men think that their career is a greater legacy than their children is disgusting. Veronica read her letter to Farquaad, and it was honestly basically a love letter to Dave. She was like, Dave is amazing and perfect and gorgeous and extremely attractive and sexy. And Farquaad is none of those things. Farquaad was like, oh, I thought the letter was meant to state good things and bad things, and I was kind of waiting for the good things to come. Veronica was like, well, you're just not attentive, Farquaad. You know, for example, I was sitting in the kitchen. Dave brought me my meal. He'd prepared it for me. He asked me if I needed cutlery. He brought it for me. He then gave me a napkin. When I was done, he took my plate away and he washed it up for me. That is being attentive, Farquaad. Farquaad was like, oh, so you want like a restaurant experience? Veronica, no joke, stands over the top of him and is like, that was so disrespectful. I will not have this conversation with you. You are beneath me. It was very intense and definitely not an okay way to speak to someone. Jamie then read her letter to Dave. The crux of it was, Dave, why don't you ever initiate sex? Dave danced around the answer. He wasn't really giving Jamie anything, so she kept pushing it, and eventually she was like, is the reason you don't initiate sex because you're not in love with me? And Dave said, yes. Things then got awfully quiet, and Jamie wondered if they could ever come back from that. Back at Karina and Punchy Paul's camp, Karina was ready to confront Paul about some of the words he'd missed when reading back his letter. Karina questioned, why did you leave out the word snob when you reread me the letter? Punchy Paul was like, well, you see, Karina, when I reread it, I realized that that is actually a quite harsh word. And so I did not want to say that. And Karina was like, yeah, but did you say that to Athena? And he was like, well, yes. The producers then asked Paul why he'd left out the word snob. And Paul, all of a sudden, reverted back into a very thick French accent. He was like, snob, I don't know exactly what this word. Is it the good word? Is it the bad word? I don't know, because my English is very small and I'm much better when I speak French. Oh, now he pulls the French card. Shut up, Paul. Anywho, if you loved my reviews, hit that follow button and I'll be here, same place, same time, tomorrow night.